Generally speaking, there is a conception of what is a perfect physical type, and it changes. Generally speaking, and this is totally flexible, but it changes generally about every 6 years. There is a new interpretation of physical perfection. And I often tell my audiences that if they are not physically perfect now, if they can wait 500 or 600 years, it will be their turn. But of course, that's really not going to happen. But there are times when historically really, really, really thin bodies are appropriate, and other times when very fleshy bodies. In the 18th century, for the most part, fashion comes from court life in Europe. So you're talking about the French court, English, the German states. Spain still had a very important and powerful court. The Netherlands, most of the European countries had an aristocratic system. And the people of power were the people of wealth. They had the opportunity and, in fact, the necessity to dress well. Certainly many of the queens felt that it was important for them to dress in a lavish way to illustrate the financial success of the country. By the time you get into the 1820s and 30s, the men of influence are older. Their female counterparts tend to be their same age, 25 to 35, 40 maybe. And generally speaking, as you get older, you're more resistant to displaying the whole body. So they concentrate more and more on just the waistline. So the waistline has to be small, so the corset becomes more and more important. Sometimes the corset is there, as I suggest, to just to make the waistline look small so that she appears young and feminine. There's also what we call beauty by impairment, which means the more handicapped the woman is by her clothing, the greater her status and her appeal. She's weakened, so this appeals to the male ego. For one thing, I guess there's a certain kind of sort of hunting instinct here. If she can't run, it's easier to catch her. But also, if she appears to be weak and frail, he feels necessary. He has to help her out of the carriage. He has to help her get up from her chair, that sort of thing. So there's a certain kind of satisfaction in feeling necessary. The First World War is the single most important political event in the last 200 or 300 years, affecting the roles of women and what they wear. And that's because women needed to be functional, not just ornamental. Throughout the 20s, as women became more comfortable with being liberated and whatnot, they also wanted something that was a little bit sexier. You still have to look for romance, you have to find a husband or whatever. So what happens is this dresses actually get more closely fitted, less baggy, and shorter. So you can't see her body, but you see her legs. And this is the first time, in an exaggerated way, that part of her body becomes accessible to the male eye, or to the eye just generally. So by 1925, a lot of times the skirts come just to the bottom of the knee. This is news. This is an entirely new way of looking at sexual attractiveness and whatnot, and it was hot stuff. We don't think of it now because we're so used to short shorts and micro minis and bikinis and whatnot, but in the 1920s, this was shocking. Those young women had grandmothers who were sure that they were all going to go to hell. This was the beginning of the end of civilization, but it's always the beginning of the end of civilization. By the time you get into the late 60s, the early 70s, the whole hippie thing happens, and a complete radical reaction about fashion. And you're supposed to be the person you actually are. If you have kinky hair, then you enjoy that, and you have a big afro. I have a wonderful book printed in Paris in the 1890s discussing the history of women wearing trousers. And in the 1890s, that was almost a forbidden subject. At the end of the book, they predict what women will be wearing in the year 2000. And they show a woman wearing trousers and boots and smoking a cigarette. And that in 1898 is about when the book was printed. That's what they think women will be wearing in the year 2000. And when you look around, almost 90% of the women you would run across in the street, especially in the street because it's practical, they are wearing trousers. So, but it's dangerous to predict the future because you look dumb, because it usually isn't going to be that.